Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this, our final session of our Startups Programme webinars. And today I have been joined by two wonderful industry experts that are going to give you some hints and advice all about taking that leap into launching your startup. So looking at the impacts potentially on your well-being, your mental health, how to make sure that you are supporting that and doing everything that you can to make sure this is a positive journey for you. So we've been joined by Hughes, who's the founder of Inspire to Ignite CIC, and also Jacqui Purdy. Jacqui's an executive coach, and she has founded Here to There, and more recently, Here and Now. Just a few little bits of housekeeping before we get started. So we have allowed an hour for this session. That does include a Q&A as well. So please do make sure you're making use of the chat box, which you should be able to see on the right hand of your screen. Pop any questions into there and we'll make sure that we loop background and cover as many of those questions as possible. If you do find you have any issues with your internet connection, you should be able to press the refresh button, which you'll find up by your browser bar, and that should bring you straight back into the live room. We've got a nice amount to cover today, so without further ado, we'll get started. Hi, Jacqui. Hi, Alex. Thanks for joining me today.
How you doing?
Hi, guys.
Would you be able to tell me a little bit about yourselves and the wonderful organisations that you've set up, and how a little bit about your experience within the field of obviously launching these startups and making sure that we're safeguarding ourselves and the impacts that we might feel within our mental well-being when we're taking that big leap. If we start with you, Jacqui.
Yeah, hi. Morning, everyone. Thanks for having me, Zoe. Yeah, I set up my first business about 7 years ago, and I had worked on PAYE for some 25 plus years, something like that. So it was a big change. But I was very ready for it. And I think that's probably one of the first things to kind of consider in this is how ready you feel to make those shifts and those changes. And I set up this coaching practice called Here to There because I kind of stumbled across coaching and fell in love with it and had a real sense of purpose. And again, I think that's another really crucial thing to have a sense of. If you know why you're doing what you're doing and it aligns with your values, that will see you in very good stead in terms of kind of that, reassuring you that you're doing the right thing. So I set up Here to There, which is around mostly helping coach around career transition and working with small business owners, sometimes with large organizations. That was about 7 years ago. And then a few years later, a slightly eclectic career path. I'm also a yoga instructor, and found like there was a great synergy actually between some of the philosophy of yoga, the breath work, the philosophy and the movement, and coaching. We kind of, the body does more than just carry the brain around, and if you connect the whole lot up, you can really look after mental well-being and get a real sense of positivity. So I set up Here and Now, which is very much about present moment stuff and performance and kind of turning out your best self, if you like. That was a few years ago now. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing, thank you. And how about you, Alex?
Yeah, so I think I probably started more out of necessity than a kind of originally anyway. So I was a 14-year-old father is how I started my life. So I had to grow up pretty quickly. So you couldn't possibly work. It wasn't even legal for me to work at that age. So I had to just get on with it and go and make money and sort myself out, if you like. So it was a hurried start, to say the least. However, over the last 20 years, that's led on to quite the entrepreneurial journey. I've started 9 businesses. We've employed about 150 people in various different sectors in the area. I bought a few businesses now, sold a few. And then later on, so last couple of years, it's now kind of transformed into a bit of an obsession of building kind of social impacts and economic growth in our area. So moved from for-profit into CIC world, into our community interest company world, which is perfectly aligned with obviously the work that Crowdfunder do and Smiley, who I'm a big fan of. So it's kind of 2 phases. The first one was a necessity, had to do it, no other choice, get on with it. develop the resilience as you go. And then the second time round was much more kind of purpose-led passion projects that have gone on. So a little bit about the organization that I'm currently working on, Inspired to Ignite CIC. Essentially, it's taking that exact journey that I went on when I was younger and building a self-development framework around it. So we work with 16 to 24-year-olds in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and we use starting a business as a self-development journey. So those that have dropped out of school, whether that be through necessity, like it was for me, or just because they don't fit in academia, it doesn't quite serve them, we're proving that an entrepreneurial route into industry is just as effective and teaches very different skills. So yeah, subject close to my heart.
Wonderful, thank you. And I can imagine for many people of that age, that could be quite an intimidating thing to take that leap into becoming an entrepreneur. It's not necessarily something that we are taught much about through our kind of academic journey. You know, we're given many routes, aren't we? But it seems entrepreneurialism isn't necessarily one of those that's focused heavily on. What advice would you give to somebody, Alex, that is maybe feeling a little bit nervous, a bit fearful about kind of taking that leap into what might be the unknown really for them? Obviously, you've got a lot of experience with your own for-profit and not-for-profit businesses. Do you still get that feeling?
So I think everything starts with self-awareness, regardless. Everything starts there. You need to understand who you are. We talk about many hats that you have to wear when you start a business, and it's something that we cover a lot in the work we do. And actually the question isn't what are you doing when you're an entrepreneur, when you're starting your own business, that you move from what am I doing today to who am I being today. And I think that's a really important reference that you can understand about yourself, because you're going to have to be. When I first started, I was driving the van in the evening, because my first business was a laundry business. I was driving a van in the evening, doing invoicing when I get back, planning all my social media content, getting up at 5 a.m. to go and do networking and whatever else. Then doing IT. You're wearing all the hats. So understanding who you are before you go into anything is really important. And with that self-awareness, which comes through, whether it be meditating or journaling or coaching or sometimes therapy required, like this is a life commitment. This isn't a professional choice that you're making if you're starting a business. It's a life commitment. Your life will change fundamentally in every aspect when you decide to start your own business. So understanding that, being self-aware of what gets you going and where you need to focus your energy, I think is really important. So, starting to build that understanding of yourself, then starting to put the behaviors and habits in that will match that. So you're asking yourself, I do it with food now, instead of thinking, I fancy a donut or coffee or whatever, instead I ask myself a question of how do I want to feel an hour from now, which would lead to a better decision. So it's the same with understanding your vision and your business. How will you feel when you did do those 10 business development calls or whatever you've got to do today? How will you feel a week from now from doing that? So I think it's one of those, how do you convert fear into excitement, which I'm sure can be part of the conversation today. But when you look back on it, the first year, I call it the chaos year. You can't do anything wrong. Just use your curiosity. And if you look back on it, that's actually the easiest part. Making the leap is the easy bit. It's a decision that you need to make. I say easy, it's probably more, it's a simple thing. It's not always easy. But actually looking back now, that was probably the easiest part of it. It's 3 months in where it starts to get a bit more challenging because, wait a minute. Everyone, I built a website, I built a business, and no one came. Oh, right, okay, fine. I actually need to do something now. So yeah, that would be my advice, if there's some advice in there.
Amazing, thank you. And how about you, Jacqui? I mean, you're coming at it from what I would say is a very kind of, a grounded space. You've got that yoga kind of teacher side of you. So was that helpful in that aspect to be able to have that self-awareness, be mindful in those moments, or was it still quite scary for you? Like, what was your experience?
Yes and yes, I say, in a nutshell. It's wonderful to Alex's point, that piece around self-awareness is crucial, and nothing better than literally being able to take, a few seconds to just notice how you're showing up in yourself. How's the heart? Is it like boom, boom racing? just noticing how you feel in a moment is a great indicator of how things are. And I think as well, to Alex's point, also being able to project forward about what it is that how you want things to be going forward is really important. Because in some ways, the enthusiasm to kind of take that leap will carry you in the beginning. There's, I don't know if everyone has ever seen this great thing that Paul Graham coined the phrase, the trough of sorrow with a startup. So, you know, you kind of like, you have your startup, you're normal, you're about to do it. And then you're like, yay, I've done it, I'm off. And then it can kind of like, whoo, it can plummet down. And you can stay along in this little trough of sorrow for a bit where things are kind of, because you're just trying to work out what's what. So staying aware and conscious of how you're feeling through that time, I think, is really important. The other thing I would suggest is, from a more pragmatic perspective, whether it's necessity or it's choice, do listen in about what the concerns and the fears are. Try to work out what's negative narrative, the belief thing, you can't do it, you'll never do it, and what's real, what is a tangible issue that needs addressing, that might stop you, that's an obstacle, and think about what the plan B might be. So there's, it's a little bit of practical stuff, a little bit of listening and, going with the heart, and just expect it. It's not going to always be like that. It could be a bit like that. That makes sense.
You've basically described a crowdfunding journey as well, which is why I was smiling away so broadly. Is we often talk about a live crowdfunder being very much in a U shape. So, you launch and you're all excited. Everybody's excited for you, and you get some donations, and then maybe a week or so in, it starts to possibly kind of, get a little bit stagnant, might dip a little bit. You don't get donations coming in, and you get the fear, and you think that was it. That's no more money is coming in. What am I going to do? But then actually towards the end, it will pick up. If you've got a nice plan in place as well, where you can be proactive throughout that time. So as you mentioned, Jacqui, listening to what's actually real, what is a hurdle. So in terms of having those plans in place to be reactive, I think is important, isn't it? To anticipate that it's not going to be plain sailing is probably a really crucial thing to be doing. So actually, yeah, they do go very much hand in hand, those two experiences. In terms of, I don't know whether to use the word failure. I know it's something we probably don't want to talk about when we're talking about startups, but would you say that there is that element of fear of failure holding people back? And what would be your advice? I mean, I always think about fail being the first attempt in learning. And I guess you mentioned the plan B there, Jacqui. What would be your take on flipping the word failure on its head? And can that actually be quite useful in the first stages of your startup, that maybe everything might not go to plan? How do you kind of learn from that, work over those hurdles?
You absolutely said it, Zoe. That first attempt in learning, reframe. This is all part of resilience. Expect there will be down times, but everyone in their life will already have had some downtimes. As resilience beings, we have our comebacks. Remember when you had your comebacks, because we do bounce back. That's how it works. So, as Alex said, this is a life thing. It's not it's not just a professional thing. You put 100% of you into it when it's your business. So being ready, know what it takes for you to be able to bounce back. So that, so first attempt in learning for me works really well. You have to expect to learn from your failures. That's the best way to learn. So I think that probably that's the most important thing for me. And also that bit about failing, allow for, I suppose, what am I trying to say? Ring fence the things that you are really concerned about, that you don't want to go wrong. So there might be some things that you can that is out of bounds. I can't have that happen. And do your best to mitigate that. After that, there are things that, you just have to be able to roll with it, and be prepared to pivot as well, because things don't always roll quite the way you're expecting to.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah, you might need to not climb over the hurdle, but actually circumnavigate it in a different way. And Alex, I mean, your experience is so inspiring. At that kind of young age, was that something that was I imagine, quite daunting for you, but did you have pitfalls along the way? Were you able to kind of mitigate those difficult, what might turn into a failure kind of circumstance? Like, what was your experience through those kind of things in the early days?
So I think, so I talked about my earlier experiences when I was younger, which is really, really relevant because that tells you why I care and I've got that frame of reference. But actually, probably what's more relevant is in the last 7 years is where I've really been building. So I'm 34 now. So if you think, I may have started that way, I then went into corporate and I actually went into, I worked in a global pharmaceutical company as a project manager for a while. And I was exiting that role and starting my business on the side and slowly moved my way into doing my own thing, and that scaled beyond that. I think, failures, it's our currency. As entrepreneurs, it's what we operate in. You need to get comfortable in that space. And I think, we're all unique. We're all very different. And so I can only speak from my own frame of reference. It's where I operate best. I learned I built my resilience by knocking on the door of the mother of my son's door every week and being told to do one because I wasn't allowed to see him for a part of his life. So I learned my resilience there. So I always have that frame of reference to look back on and go, right, okay, well, when I had a commercial cleaning company, for instance, one of the businesses I bought, I would go out and knock on the doors of these factories and whatever else around the corner, and I'd do it in the rain because I knew they'd feel sorry for me and let me in. So you start to have this, you build this kind of resilience, and you kind of have some fun with it, and you understand that that's what it's about. It's about getting a yes or a no. We're in a really interesting market. If you're going into startup world right now, we're in a really interesting space. You better get used to that failure and really start to understand how you can use it as energy, because you'll do one of the badges that we offer to young people when we're working with them is called 100 rejections. So for us, how do you develop resilience as an entrepreneur? Well, you go and pitch your idea 100 times, get told no on repeat, and you'll soon learn to love it because you'll get that one yes. That one yes will come, and that's where you'll be able to hold on to that and go from there. Something I would say in terms of how to help keep you focused and motivated when that's all happening, because that is inevitable, is the word community. Find other people like you that are on a similar journey. Your friends and your family love you, but they are not the right people to support you on this journey unless they've been through this before. It's lived experience is everything. And finding other people around you that are on that journey is so important. That's why things like this that Crowdfunder are doing, where the chat feature here is your best friend. These people are about to go on this journey together, and actually, yes, find a mentor, great, get some support, get some support from masterclasses, things like this. But actually, it's the peers, it's the people that you're going to go on that journey with, because then you can set those squad standards, if you like, and you can start to develop a community around it and the accountability that comes. But quite frankly, I can only be honest, it's not an easy thing. So, get used to failing, because that's where the innovation's found, that's where the opportunities are found, and that's where your network will build around that.
Amazing. Thank you. We've had some lovely comments actually coming in through the chat box. So we've had from Munira, we've had that's all you need, one yes out of 99 no's. Debbie's just mentioned as well, she totally agrees with you, Alex. You need to find your tribe. And again, just bringing it back to crowdfunding in its purest essence, that's what we're challenging you to do through a crowdfunding campaign, is actually go out there and find that community that's invested in your idea. So those two things, again, go hand in hand, helping you to build that resilience, find your community and tap into it and bring them on the journey with you. So you've got that lovely network of support. In terms of, Alex, you mentioned there working for the pharmaceutical company and then kind of starting business on the side. What was that like in terms of, again, that kind of feeling of leaving that job security and moving over back into the entrepreneur kind of world? There might be a lot of people that are going through this process now where they've got a safe job, salary coming in every month, and thinking about taking that leap, but feeling really quite nervous about letting go of that kind of secure financial state. What was your experience of that? And do you have any advice for those in that same situation?
Great question, really relevant, and is usually a big barrier for people Well, the first barrier is usually I don't have the idea. By the way, the world of business has nothing to do with the idea. It's about the market and serving the market and finding a gap and finding that you fit in it. But on the job security front, I would question that phrase. Like, how secure is that? Like, look at the market right now. You know, if you look, I mean, I can't see a situation like now. There's 1.1 million vacancies in the UK right now, right? So you can go, if you know yourself, if you know your strengths, if you've got some experience in whatever you're doing, can you have a conversation with yourself, which is what I did, say, well, if this doesn't work out in 6 months, I've got enough cash flow in the bank to enable me to do that. So I planned the cash flow to say, right, I'm going to make this leap, and I'm going to, you know, worst case scenario, I can get a job in 6 months or 3 to 6 months. I think I can safely say here that regardless of who you are, and I've got enough connection across industry in the UK now to say this, that I could get you a job tomorrow that's paying you 20% more than it's paying you now, and probably has more satisfaction in what you're doing regardless. So the safety is already there. Like, there's not in the job that you have, it's in the job market to know that you can go get a job whenever you need it. That I think is existing in most parts of the UK, especially now we've got so much digital accessibility around work. In question to making that leap from a mindset point of view, again, it comes back to our commitment. You know, do you have a clear definition of what those objectives are? And if they're not achieved, do you have a plan B, C, and D? You know, and you're just about risk management. I was a project manager before, so I can put that hat on for a moment and say, right, okay, well, what are the scenarios of play? And that's what we do. Entrepreneurs paint the picture of the future. We're always in the future state. We're always trying to think about the future. Where are we going 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And what happens here? What if I tweak that? So you start to simulate the future for yourself, which will likely motivate you to go through it. Not everyone will understand. Like, I was fast tracking, by the way. So I got to understand the corporate world quite quickly because I wasn't coming at it from I need to prove myself and I need a certificate for someone to tell me that I'm qualified. I just literally plowed my way through this corporate organization. I was getting pay rise and promotion every 6 months. And my boss at the time was, Alex, I don't understand. Like, you could easily go on to global leadership within this organization. They'd invested a lot of money in me. And you want to do what? You want to go off and start a laundry company and do people's ironing. I was like, yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm doing. So the key to all of that, and understand, and something to remember as you're developing your startup, whether it's your first one or you plan on doing many and you want to be a serial entrepreneur, is the word asset. You're not creating a job. You're not moving from a job to a job. You're moving to a different mindset where your role is about developing assets. Assets pay you. They don't employ you. You develop these businesses. You set them up in a way that you can exit them so they can then look after you beyond that. That's real security as far as I'm concerned. Far more secure than any job.
Amazing, thank you. And Jacqui, what's your take on that feeling as well? You know, there's people saying here, Derek's mentioned that that's his situation at the moment. You know, lots of people that are currently sat in employment, really wanting to do something that they know will be more fulfilling, for example, but again, just slightly nervous of taking that leap. Oh, Jacqui, I seem to have lost your audio.
Yes. You got me?
Yeah.
I think, again, Alex is right. You know, when he was talking about knowing that he looked at his cash flow for 6 months and thought, right, I can give this 6 months. I think that this thing about working out how to de-risk a little bit. So, you know that you've got enough to live on for a certain period of time. So you can bank that. That's not it. That's not the worry. After that, I think it's about having faith in yourself and, you know, being ready to pivot and to change. One of the things I think is quite important about this, about being able to go out on your own, is understanding about what makes you tick in terms of values, in terms of whys. You're going to need to want a degree of autonomy, right? Because there's no one's going to be telling you what to do. It's a very different setup. Alex talked earlier as well about community, and I think that is really, really important, because for a lot of people who are in a current job, and I know this was for me personally, you know, we can only speak to our own experiences, but for me, leaving the team of people that I worked with and had worked with for some time was a thing, because I loved working with them. They were an epic team to be with. So know what's important to you and work out how you're going to feed some of that. Because those fears of letting go of a job won't always just be about job security and money. They'll be about other things. So have some clarity around that.
Amazing, thank you. And you mentioned then the autonomy as well that's involved with kind of doing this and setting out on your own. Have you got any advice, Jacqui, on how somebody might stay motivated, especially if they're, you know, teetering on the edge of that, what did we call it, the trough of
sorrow?
There we are. So let's say you've plummeted into the trough of sorrow. How do you keep that resilience and that motivation to keep wading through the trough so you can come out the other side? That's quite a potentially scary place to be.
Yeah,
and it's somebody might not have experienced before when they haven't had to be so autonomous in previous roles.
Yeah, it's a funny business. We are remarkably short on memory when things start to go a bit downhill. So my advice, first and foremost, before you do any of this stuff, is I call it create a wall of arrogance. All right. So, just start noting down all the good stuff. Yeah. Just get it all down. When you're in a good mood, when you're feeling quite up and positive about things, make a list of all the stuff that you are proud of, that you have achieved. And it doesn't matter whether it's work related or not. That's not it. What you need is to keep that sense of motivation there. Get it all down on a list and have it somewhere in front of your computer, over your computer, wherever it is, in your back pocket, on a piece of paper, whatever, on your phone. Have it, but every week, religiously, put something in it that you are proud of, that you are achieving. And it doesn't matter how small it is, and you don't have to share it with anyone else. What is important in this is that you are sometimes going to have to be the only one to pull yourself up by those belt braces and keep going on. No, be realistic. Know it can be really quite challenging, but you've got this. And what is the worst that can possibly happen in this? What is the worst? You just, square it off with a plan B, but also keep being positive about things. Keep finding things to remind yourself that you know what you're good at, and have some evidence for it.
Yes, as well, just allowing yourself that time to be present in that feeling. Like, you're going to have days where it's hard. You're going to have days where you get those rejections after rejections, but knowing that that's not a permanent state, I think, is quite important, isn't it? And we talked a lot in this session about trying to make things as low risk as possible and just bringing it back to that crowdfunding kind of standpoint.
Yes.
This is why we're encouraging people to use something like the Crowdfunder platform to actually generate those funds, so that you are not putting yourself in potential financial risk in order to get something off the ground. Think cleverly about where these funds are going to come from. And if crowdfunding is a route for you to do that, embrace it. Absolutely. Don't put yourself under undue stress or pressure to financially back something when there's the mechanics out there to help you do it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Thank you so much. I just want to make sure, we've had some brilliant comments coming through in the chat box. I just want to reiterate as well that please do feel free to ask questions, and we'll field those to Alex and Jacqui as well as we're going along. Would either of you have any advice on techniques or skills that people could use to overcome self-doubt? So in those days, you mentioned there, having either journaling, Alex, you mentioned, didn't you, or, mindfulness, meditation possibly. And I love the idea of almost that self kind of gratitude, that list of actually kind of being your own cheerleader, I think is really important and really transferable. Everyone needs that, I think, in their life anyway, regardless of whether they're thinking of taking this leap or not. But do you have anything that works for you guys in particular on top of that, or any advice and tips on how to really cement that as a habit?
Yeah, so we're all different. I always have to kind of footnote that everyone's completely different, and we all need different things. Something you said there, Jacqui, I thought was really interesting about the words you used, but essentially talk about insecurities and ego. That's our biggest issue as we get older. Sometimes, and I say older. At 18, I felt quite old, being 4 years into being a father, let alone that now when I'm 34 and I've got a 5-month-old baby as well right now. So it's, understand it. Find a way to reset your insecurities and your ego, because that will allow your curiosity to take over again. Like, we are all born curious. We're all born creative. That's our starting state when we come into the world. So, they're the two superpowers for any great entrepreneur. Honestly, some of the like the most amazing people I've met, and I've had the privilege of meeting some incredible people in my journey as an entrepreneur and other entrepreneurs. They just have this relentless curiosity about them that nothing gets in the way of them asking those questions that they need to ask. Nothing gets in the way of them fulfilling their vision, their purpose. I've got one friend who's an entrepreneur. He won't mind me saying, they go to events and they will literally go there and they're there to get one contact. And as soon as they get that one meaningful contact, they leave. Like that's the way that's the way they protect themselves, because they can't, it's not their natural state. They don't get energized by being around a lot of people, but they know it's important. So they find ways to use that. Personally, I love digital detoxes. So once a year at the very least, Christine, my partner, and I, and now our baby, we did it at Christmas, and I've got a beautiful Labrador as well, and I love walking. We book ourselves a cabin in the middle of nowhere, usually somewhere like Suffolk somewhere, and we leave all digital devices behind. So for 10 days, we just completely digital detox and journal and relook at our plans and realign. So we'll do something. It's good if you're in business and you've got a partner in life, whether they're in business with you or not, for alignment. So I'll spend a whole day thinking about what I want to achieve for the year ahead. Christine will do the same, and then we'll come together and say, what do we want to achieve together this year? And that we've got that kind of alignment check every year, which is really helpful. But coming back to the insecurities side of things, there's something about mindset that we don't talk about much, which is the darker areas of it. So in the sense of, leaning into that, like I'm scared to fail. Like, when you scale and you build your business to a point when actually, no, it's not okay. You can't, my brother goes into a mental health crisis. I've got to get involved and support him. I've got a baby coming. Life doesn't stop, right? But when you've got 100 people's mortgages, responsibility for that, you've got to kind of work with that darkness. You've got to work with that and find a way to build in those disciplines, build in those behaviors. And actually, sometimes self-care is doing it anyway, in the sense of you had to do it. I feel better that I did it. Right now, I'm feeling a bit low. I need to protect myself. Again, understanding my triggers and having people around me that understand my triggers. Go, Alex, get out, get in your hammock, go for a nap, whatever. I do have a hammock where I tend to nap in the daytime as well, which is another thing. Naps are really good. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to say something about that darkness and that it exists, and it's sometimes very useful to lean into it as a motivator. It's not all just kind of, very happy and, it's just not that world. That's not the world we live in. It's a difficult thing you're about to do, but the rewards are, different level from a personal point of view. I hope that helps in some way.
No, I think it really does. And I think, the purpose of today's session isn't to sugarcoat everything and say, take that leap, everything's going to be amazing. What's the worst that could happen? There are going to be potentially quite dark periods, and you might feel that real weight of responsibility, or have I made the right decision? These are all big questions that people may feel at some point during this whole process. And actually, having the confidence to lean into them, having the confidence and the resilience to use it as actually a fuel for motivation, as opposed to get, succumbed and overwhelmed by that, I think is really important, and it's important to talk about. So thank you, Alex, very much. Do you have any take on that, Jacqui, as well? And we have had some questions come through, so I'll field those to you guys in just a second.
Yeah, I think it's really important to stay match fit physically and mentally. So eat, I know it sounds daft, but eat well, eat properly, get some rest. And I know that sounds so crazy, and I sound like everyone's mother, but there's a huge difference between our capacity to be able to handle complexity, emotional challenges when we are rested. In coaching, we'll talk about the analogy, when you're in a plane and, suddenly the oxygen levels drop and down comes the mask, and they'll say to you on a plane, you got to take the oxygen before you can be feeding everyone. There's a point there in that, and that is about just making sure that there's some self-care in that. And I think Alex is absolutely right. Dark times will come, and our capacity to be able to sit with it, know it for what it is, and respond to it rather than react and kind of go into a negative spiral. It takes being able to be self-aware, and being able to dig down and find the strength. So staying physically fit and mentally fit is really important. Get out into nature, spend time with people that you love, do create a support network of people that you know will be useful to you for different things, right? So, there are some people, like my husband and I are business partners now. We weren't planning to be, but now we are. There are some things I would not ask him about because it won't be helpful to me. I've got other people I go to and ask those questions. So everyone can create a support network of people that can give you great ideas, someone who listens well to you, someone who's a good source of information, someone who's good at helping you network, a good accountability partner. Just build a support network for yourself, as well as having that community of people who know just how it feels, because there's nothing quite like that.
Amazing, thank you. You've both made me think of something that I read actually recently about how we view success. And I think now we've moved with so much more awareness about our mental health and how much our physical health can impact that, and how necessary it is to kind of seek calm and rest, how we view success. And I feel like we've moved as a society away from successful people are always busy, as opposed to nowadays it's more success can take lots of different forms. And actually the busiest person who's just running on a treadmill is not necessarily the most productive person in the room. It's the person who has that self-awareness, who can prioritize, who can kind of, still make those meaningful connections and meet one person in the room and then leave. It's not that you don't have to be constantly on in order to be successful. And I think that's really important as well, to be mindful of your level of productivity and not to burn out. We've had some great questions, so I just want to come through to a couple of these. So this is from Derek. The last session you talked about using crowdfunding to validate ideas. So Derek's fear is by launching a crowdfunding page that his employers might find out, and what that might raise, obviously, in terms of those conversations between himself and his employers. What would be your advice there? And let's go to you, Jacqui, on that one.
God, I want to go into coaching mode on that one.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I know, just to give an example to Graham, and I don't know his circumstances and situation, but when I was transitioning out of what I had been doing into where I am now, I ended up in being quite honest with them about it, and that suited me. And I went down to a 3-day week from a 5-day week so that I could continue, because I needed to requalify. I needed to do things alongside. So that was the right route for me. And they were incredibly supportive. And it was something I was able to take back into the workplace because it was coaching. Quite a lot of people, I'm assuming on Crowdfunder, do things on the side, right? Many people have more than one job. It would be crazy to think that the whole world only does one job and that's it and nothing else. So it's okay to have interests, isn't it? So I think it's, at some point you're going to want to be able to have that conversation, but not until you're ready. That would be my thought, is whether, how you want things to unfold going forward, when you want to be able to have that conversation.
It could actually result in, a lovely area of your network going forward. I mean, it's hard. I think we get in the habit of creating a narrative on behalf of somebody else without actually knowing what the response is going to be. So although it might be scary, I think get your ducks in a row. But really the process of the crowdfunding campaign is testing the water as well and seeing if there's an appetite. And if off the back of that, you kind of can say, look, this is what I do want to be doing. I know now that there's a group of people that want to see this happen. This is kind of where I want to go with it. It doesn't have to be, I've launched a crowdfunding campaign and I'm quitting my job. It can very much work in harmony in the first kind of instance, can't it? Would you agree with that, Alex?
Yeah. I mean, ideal world, you're honest in any aspect of life, and you've got transparency around the relationships that you have, whether you're employed or not. That's the ideal world. I do understand in some kind of unique areas, cultures, that you can't be that honest. But that's why dark ads exist, right? So I've launched many businesses, not just my own, many others that we've supported through our consultancy. and some of which I've done that we run through dark ads. So you can run. So those that don't know, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever distribution platform you're using, quite cost effective. You can run some dark ads from a profile page that's over here, completely disassociated whatever you're doing, just to see if there's any engagement on the content you're putting out there through there. So there are other ways that you can do it. But yeah, I mean, default for me is be honest, and ideally try and sell it to them while you're there.
Well, this is it. This is my thinking on it. It's, depending obviously on what that job is and your relationships with your employers, I imagine, and this is me again, not trying to sugarcoat it, but I imagine if those relationships are nice, healthy, positive relationships in the first place, then potentially that's part of your network and your supporters going forward. Most people, I believe, I'd like to think so, are rooting for people to do well. And if that means you sidestepping away from that particular job in order to pursue something, I'd like to think there would be support there for you. But I think, honesty and transparency, that also links back to what we talked about in one of our earlier sessions about the idea of being authentic and honest throughout the whole process. And that's how people will engage with you and your business going forward. Like, it's an important thing to adopt early on. And I think that probably is one of the first hurdles for you in particular, Derek, but probably quite an important one to remain authentic and honest throughout that. This one's come in from Candice. So when we regard, this is going to you, Alex, when you spoke about creating assets as opposed to new job roles for yourself. When we regard our own business as an asset, what areas of depreciation or appreciation should we think of from business or personal level?
Nice. That's a great question.
Good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that, Candice. So let's start with personal. So I hadn't read a book until I was 20 years old. I hadn't even considered it. Even when I was at school prior, I really wasn't that engaged. Later realizing that I've likely got ADHD and potentially dyslexic made me realize that actually I needed to change the way that I learn. So your biggest asset is you as an individual. Now I'm obsessed with reading books, but I don't read them. I listen to them. So I've got Audible and I take notes while I'm walking and things like that. So the first thing is you at an individual level. How do you learn? How do you consume information? How do you better your main asset, which is you as an individual? So, when I first started the business, it took me a year to do £100,000 in revenue. Whereas, one of the last business ventures that I was involved in from a startup point of view, we did $1 million revenue in 9 months of launching. So because the knowledge and the experience that I'd gained from one, failing and on repeat and trying things and different industries, and that experience that you naturally gain through doing, but the rest of it was knowledge. I was learning. I'd read 100 books and I'd gone to conferences and I'd attend wonderful sessions like this and learn from other people and start to consume that information. Don't get too caught up in it, because a lot of people just spend a lot of time just learning and don't actually do anything with it, which is, don't get me started on academia. So I think that first personal, you as an asset, once you've got past that physical side of things, are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Are you doing all those well-being things? Then it's how do I layer on new expertise, new knowledge, new industry experience. On the business side of things, business is all about assets. It's all about, how do you develop something of value to the market that you can protect and call your own? That's kind of what an asset is, right? And know that that's not always possible. And it's fine for it not to do that. Maybe it's just cash flow. And when you first start, it's just cash flow, which is quite frankly, the only important thing when you first start. And most of the time, any time, it's cash flow. Cash flow is everything. So once you've got your cash flow, then you're really starting to develop your assets. So I hope that makes sense. But essentially, your natural path will be, how do I increase my cash flow to replace my income that I've just lost? Because a lot of this conversation is about leaving that kind of income you had before. And then after that, then you've got to look at that cash flow and start to build some barriers around it, some strength, some unity in how that works. Because at some point you're going to have to replace yourself. Someone else can manage that cash flow stream. So you can start looking at new cash flow streams. So I don't know if that helps. On the depreciation side of those assets, though, know when it's not working and just kill it. Like, take it around the back of the shed and be done with it. Sometimes you'll just hang on for it for too long. So a general principle I have is 90 days. So if I've got a new idea and I'm banned at the moment from launching new businesses, I've got a 5-month-old baby, I'm very much banned from it. So if anyone wants any free ideas, then get in touch. You can have, I've got plenty. I will allow myself 90 days. So I'll plan. I've got kind of template that I adapt depending on whether I'm direct to consumer or B2B or whatever that service looks like. I have a 90-day plan to go and launch that business, or whether I do crowdfunding or whatever. And I've dabbled in that area as well. And then after 90 days, if it's not working, kill it, move on. Next, if you don't get it over the line in 90 days, then quite frankly, really, it's probably not going to work most of the time. But that's fine. Move on to the next one. Hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Alex. I was just thinking that difference, isn't it, between a passion project and a viable business? And I think you do need those honest people around you. Of course, like you said, friends and family will probably champion you regardless of the idea. They just want to see you succeed and be happy. And it's about testing the water and actually seeing if this is something that is unique to you and you think there's a need, or is there genuinely a need for whatever it is that you're putting out into the world? And that can be quite a hard pill to swallow. But we talked about, haven't we, the being able to sit with yourself in those moments and think, okay, maybe that wasn't the one. What's the feedback that I'm getting? Well, where can I kind of push this into it being a viable business? So being reactive and pivoting possibly if you need to.
So can I just say as well that the pivoting, like end game is pivot. Like, I'm not saying give up, pivot. It's always pivot. It's stay in the game as long as you can. But the thing about passion things, I really want to say this because I struggle with the find your passion piece in the sense that I think that's an ongoing journey as you develop as a human, and your passions and your interests will change. Like someone once said to me, which I think is fascinating, some may relate, their passion was laying in their pants playing PlayStation. Who's paying them for that? So, it's, if cash flow is what's required, focus on cash flow, go get the cash that will build you the security that you're missing to enable you to go and fulfill your passion. My passion is helping 16 and 24-year-olds and develop assets in my community. That's not very profitable. And we're actually by design not a for-profit. We're a CIC by guarantee. But I've got what I call my boring businesses over here, my portfolio, which is all designed for high profit cash flow, which enables me to do the passion. So I just wanted to say that it's not always a passion project. Passion plays a big part, but sometimes you need cash flow before you're allowed to go do that.
Amazing, thank you. Just coming to you, Jacqui, we've had a couple of questions about kind of the mindset, and one which has come through, which really struck me, was how do you get over the overthinking and trying to get things perfect? That horrible voice in your head that's telling you it's not perfect.
Oh gosh, and we've all got them, right? And I think recognizing them for what they are. So there's I don't know if anyone's ever come across him before. There's this guy called Shirzad Shameen, and he's got this book, Positive Intelligence. Yeah. And so this thing. So the way that positive intelligence works is Shirzad talks about inside us, right in our kind of solar plexus area, we've got a sage, all right, and sage speaks quite quietly. On our shoulders, we've got two absolute beast saboteurs, and one of them is very judgy, judge. We've all got a judge, and then there's always another one, which is it's like a well-worn muscle. It's really strong. And it will have a negative narrative, and it's loud. So the point in all of this is that you need to be able to recognize it. And so for me, and the thing I will always ask people to do is to take a mindful minute, stop, notice what is being said, if necessary, record it somewhere and actually find the evidence for it, because we can overthink things. We can make a story about how something's not going to work. I think we mentioned this earlier, Zoe, you know, where with Derek, with an employer, you know, you already know what they're going to say. We don't. So we stop making assumptions, because that will be your saboteur filling in the gaps for you. And if you really don't believe it, literally note it down, record it, write it down, but get the evidence, because you won't have it usually. You have overthought it. It's a fiction. So just know it for what it is.
Amazing. Thank you. You've actually just shared a link to the Positive Intelligence
brilliant.
in the chat box, because I absolutely love his work, and it was a real eye-opener. I was going to put it that way.
Isn't it?
I'm learning, you know, I'm trying to work through every day. Just it's an amazing thing to kind of work your way through and actually find out what your internal saboteurs are. It's quite interesting, isn't it?
It is interesting, yeah.
Thank you, Jacqui. So coming back to you, Alex, we've got one here from Rowan. Alex, what would be the mindset to achieve while meeting business individuals in the UK? As an international guy, I'm pretty curious to understand British business culture. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, wow, brilliant. Well, British culture is a melting pot of millions of cultures. So what we're talking about there is psychology and understanding humans, and I think that's really important, again, to understand others. So it's actually why we try to promote, and it's something that we're working on at the moment, is with young people, is getting them into doing some level of social care as part of their development. So learning how to look after another human, so you can start to understand human needs, because that you can then layer on that. So it starts with you, oxygen mask on, you know, look after another human, then you understand that. So if you can watch body language, if you can understand how to ask the right questions, which is what coaches are brilliant at. I think everyone should do some level of coaching as well, because I think it teaches you how to ask great questions. That's what it comes back down to, is understanding humans. I don't think that there's a good bit of advice I can offer you specific to your question about coming to the business and speaking to business people about business culture in the UK, because our culture is moving in such a drastic way right now. If you're doing business in Manchester or London, that's very different to doing business in the Fens in Cambridgeshire. You know, they are very different places. So understanding those cultures first before you get there is important. That's probably all I can say there.
Amazing. Thank you, Alex. This one's come through from Kelly, and this is really for both of you. So expanding on the comment on the darkness, which you mentioned earlier, Alex, I just get the song coming in my head when I say that, but you know, have either of you worked through dealing with procrastination due to feeling overwhelmed, maybe fearful? And I know that can be a real blocker, can't it, to actual productivity. So Alex, would you like to field that one first off?
Yeah, of course. So have I ever felt overwhelmed and had to work through it? I'm happy to share with you here, because I'm speaking from a scar and not from a wound. I've been in the situation at 4 a.m, looking myself in the mirror and shaking, having an anxiety attack. I understand the depths of that you will put you can put yourself. I didn't know, I wasn't this self-aware some time ago. I was just a bulldozer in, you know, coming in like, yeah, let's go, hoorah, burning out inevitably. So sometimes I think best advice I can say around this and where I've come from, when that time comes, if and when that time comes, that might come as a lull. That might come as a period of like stagnation in your motivation or what's happening. It comes back down to sitting with it and accepting it and saying, you know what, thank you. Actually, thank you for this moment. I'm going to use this to better learn about myself and understand about myself, and then just sticking to your basic principles. I don't have if you write a list, my partner, Christine, she would do a thing, write it on the list and then cross it off, because she loves creating the list. The list never ends, like never, ever, ever ends. Like it really doesn't, like it's impossible to complete it. It's an endless task. So I work to very simple 1 to 3 priorities a day. And that is important to me 7 days a week. That's important to me. Just as important as eating, sleeping, right? And working out, making sure that's the level of importance that I've given to these tasks that I do. And they're things that move things forward. So I think procrastination and that fear that comes in. It's behaviors and habits. That's the overarching. But I understand where you are. I get it. Sometimes it takes something horrible to happen for you to learn from it. But ideally, you'll learn from wonderful people like we've got through this masterclass series, and listen to the advice and start to develop those habits, which will help you.
Thanks, Alex. Would you agree, Jacqui, and this is just me thinking, because I am somebody who I'm prone to procrastination. I'm somebody who will write the endless list and then feel massively overwhelmed at all of the tasks that need to be done that day. Would you maybe agree that in some instances, actually thinking about the smaller goals on those days, so things that are super achievable in those moments, so you can have that kind of sense of, right, I've ticked that one off, even if it's not that huge, it's going to fix everything that day kind of task, but maybe in those moments of real overwhelm or real procrastinations, kind of strip it right back to basics. What can I do that isn't going to be a huge kind of taxing task, but that's going to make me feel good for having completed it? I know that works well for me in those moments. Is that something that you kind of might suggest? Or am I just freewheeling in my own little world?
No. Chunking stuff down. Absolutely. Because what's happening, what can be happening to us, what Alex was describing, that awful kind of feeling of anxiety, that's your amygdala in your brain just in control, and it makes it really hard to kind of start to process anything else with the kind of the center parts of the brain. So pairing it right back to one or two simple things just to bring you back on track is really important. The other thing I would suggest around procrastination, because sometimes we get really smart at kidding ourselves, right? It's like, oh, I'm busy. What I'm doing is so valuable. Again, a little bit like Alex's partner with the list, but actually record what you're doing in your day. Check out what you've done in your day. Just make a note of what you've done, and then attribute some values to it about actually how close was this in getting me to the next thing. Note it, because sometimes I think one of the biggest problems is when we think we're not procrastinating, and in fact we are. And it's not to kind of beat yourself up over it. It's just recognize it and think, okay, so what is the problem? What can I do to ease this? Am I doing too much? Have I frightened the life out of myself? Do I think this is impossible? Why do I think this is impossible? What's telling me? Just it's self-awareness, I think, is what it comes back to a lot of the time.
Amazing. Just being honest with ourselves. That actually sitting at your laptop for 8 hours doom scrolling on Facebook isn't being productive. Maybe you can turn the laptop off and go and have a nice bath for a walk and come back to it and actually do an hour of productivity. Yeah. It goes back to that hamster wheel of, I'm busy, so I must be being productive. You're not. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I've just noticed the time and we are 1 minute to the hour. So thank you everybody for joining us and all of the wonderful comments and questions. And Alex and Jacqui, you've had some really brilliant, kind of insightful and inspirational advice to give to those attending today. Just to remind everybody that's taking part in the Startups programme, that we do as well have those pots of £1,000 to go on to impactful and also what's the word I'm looking for? Innovative. Thank you. Innovative and impactful projects. So do make sure that you are putting all the planning in place, getting your crowdfunding pages nice and ready to go live, and highlighting those two things on those pages as well, because you could be receiving £1,000 from Crowdfunder towards your project. So all that remains is to say a massive thank you and good luck to everybody on your journeys. We've got your LinkedIn information on our startups page. So are you happy for people to reach out, potentially contact and connect with you in the future?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go for it.
Amazing. Thank you. And it was wonderful having you here. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks for your time. Good luck, everyone.
Good luck, everyone.